Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining us today, of course, is Michael Becker and also Jonathan Farrell with Old Capital. Thanks, guys, for being in the podcast for our first one for 2018. Should be an interesting one. As I've been banging the table for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been talking a little bit about trying to get more women into ownership of multifamily properties, more women into multifamily property ownership positions. And today we have, I think, an exceptional woman that's done a great job of owning multifamily properties in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. She started off with owning single family. She moved to a 77-unit building, and now she owns thousands of doors. And so it's going to be kind of an inspirational look on how she did it. We had her on our podcast probably a couple of years ago, and she's just gotten more powerful in terms of owners and getting to rehab some of these properties, and it's going to be a great podcast. So in the podcast today, we have Kim Radaker. So thanks for joining us, Kim. We appreciate you being in the first podcast for 2018.
Thanks for the invitation, Paul.
So tell me a little bit about your background and where did you grow up?
I grew up in the western suburbs of Chicago and I'm alumni of the University of Iowa, which is one of the reasons Paul likes me.
That's right. I did it in numerous years to graduate, and some people would call me a doctor for being in school that long, but Kim did it in 3 years. So I'm sure your parents were very proud of you, able to save them at least a year of tuition. So great job.
Thank you. I think they were happy to save that extra year of tuition. So while I was there, I was a finance major and had what they called concentrations, but basically minors in accounting and economics. So gave a really good, strong foundation in the numbers of how business works, and that has served me very well throughout my career.
And again, what was your first job when you got out of the University of Iowa? What did you do? What was your first career?
My first job out of college was actually working for KeyBank in their 401k testing department. So I learned a whole lot about pension plans and 401k plans, retirement plans, how all that worked, some intricacies of the tax code. Then moved on to a smaller company, got married, moved to Texas, and spent a little bit of time in the comp and benefits department at a Big Four accounting firm. Mm-hmm. And then went back to a smaller firm. And then when I had my kids is when I started in real estate.
And you have 2 kids.
I have 2 kids. Well, actually 2 and a stepson now.
So that's great. So you're busy doing that too. At what point did you realize that real estate investing was going to be your passion?
I really enjoyed my work in the retirement plan industry. But when the boys were born, I was listening to the radio at one point and heard kind of a radio show and started reading a few books and decided to get at least research more about investing in real estate. And so I started in the single family space when the boys were just 6 months old and bought 7 houses over the course of a year. And ended up actually at that time buying all of those for cash, and then immediately upon the renovations being completed, did the refinance in order to get the money back to go do the next one.
And how long ago was that? Did you start in the single family business?
Oh, wow. That's been a long time ago now. 10 years, 10 and a half years.
Yeah, it's been a long time. That's good. So again, how many single families did you have?
I had 7.
7, and that was all kind of value added. You buy it at a distressed sales price?
All of those at distress, either short sales, foreclosures, one that was inherited, and some that weren't horrible and some that were really bad, and fixed those up, pulled some cash out of them and held those for cash flow for quite a while, and then finally sold those a couple years ago.
So was this business something that your husband was doing and that you were just on the sidelines or the seashore watching him do all the work? or were you the one really doing all the business yourself?
This was really my business and my baby and what I was working on. It was very, very helpful that he had a regular job, which meant W-2 income. So in the single family space, that was very important in terms of getting those loans. So he was a fantastic sign here guy. I'd put the deals together, get everything done, and then I'd be like, here, you need to sign this paperwork for the bank. And
So how did you make the transition? Because I think it's a good time for us to move over from single family into the multifamily. Do you remember what year it was that you made that transition?
2011 was when I transitioned to multifamily. And I think 2007 and 2008 was when we were buying the single families. And then, it took a bit of a pause just as the boys were getting more mobile and into more stuff and had a little bit more other things on my plate, but then took our opportunity to move into multifamily. And it's been an outstanding ride.
All right, let me kick it over to Jonathan. Let's begin our discussion on multifamily.
Yeah, so Kim, when you made your transition into the multifamily, did you completely sold all of your single families to make that transition, or did you keep those going? Or
No, we actually kept those going for a couple years after I got into the multifamily space. It would have been nice to sell them perhaps, but the cash flow that they were providing, because we had done a purchase for cash with a refi out afterwards, was more substantial than what we wanted to give up, especially given the amount of equity that would have been there after doing all the transactions and closing costs of selling them. So we just went ahead and moved forward with the money that we were able to put together at that time and put it in multifamily.
Great. Okay, and so when you went to buy your first multifamily, did you just use cash that you had and the experience you had from the single families, or did you reach out to any additional equity partners and get any additional education?
I had a partner that I was working with on the time that was sort of actively in the same process as I was, kind of transitioning from single family to multifamily investing. And so besides the two of us, we had 6 other partners in the first transaction that we did.
Jonathan, do you know who made Kim her first loan?
Did you?
Well, it was, of course I did. But the other guy sitting at the table, Mr. Michael Becker.
That's right, yeah. Spanish Chase, 77 units, right?
Yes,
yeah.
indeed.
Yeah, I met Kim at the beginning, and that was a rough deal at the time. Had a bunch of challenges and took it on and did successful. That was summer 2011?
Yeah, we bought that in August of 2011 and sold it in November of 2012.
It's good. So that was a good success, and then you ended up parlaying that into Family Tree Apartments, is that right?
Family Tree, which we renamed as Las Brisas. And so that one, we actually did a 1031 from Spanish Chase into Las Brisas. So the initial gain on Spanish Chase was 136%. Las Brisas was a very interesting property. The time that we bought it, it was 50% occupied.
To say what was good about it when you bought it. That's probably the better question.
It was still standing,
yeah.
And the price per door was low.
Yeah.
I think those were probably the best things about it. It was a huge opportunity, though. It had an awful lot wrong with it, but it was about 50% occupied. They had actually gone through about a month-long period, about 5 or 6 months before we bought it, where all the boilers went down on the property and there was no hot water for 30 days. So in addition to only being 50% occupied, you can imagine that the majority of the people that stuck around through those 30 days were not exactly the ones that you wanted to have there. So I think we took it down to about 32% occupied before we ever actually started leasing. But we did a huge renovation on it, and it turned out to be a beautiful property.
So, Kim, I think it's safe to say that you kind of carried your value add look for what you're looking for over to multifamily. Can you kind of dig in or dive into what's your investment criteria when you're looking for these types of properties?
Investment criteria now, I really like larger properties when I can get them, but there are times when smaller properties come up that are a good opportunity, either on their own because it's the last leftover asset or it just wasn't as marketable or somebody else couldn't see the value as much to it, or if it's part of a larger portfolio. So we have a couple smaller properties, but for the most part, our target is larger properties. I love it when they're built after 1978, but we definitely have had some that are older as well. And you just have to be aware of those things and budget a little more for sewer repairs, and it can all work out as well.
So historically, you've been kind of in the DFW market to date. How many properties have you purchased?
We have purchased 11 properties.
And how many have you sold?
We've sold 5 of those.
5, so you have 6
So
on
we have
hand.
6 right now. So
But the thing in terms of how many units have you bought?
Okay, so in those 11 properties is over 3,800 units, and we have a 12th property under contract. So that one will put us up to about 4,200.
That's a lot.
Yeah, so Kim is good at buying larger assets for economies of scale. I mean, you could buy a 50 or 60 or 70 unit building, but why do that when you can buy a 656 unit building, as I say?
Exactly.
So as you've been growing your portfolio, and I know you did this years ago, but you also have your own management company and also your own materials company.
I do have my own management company, construction and materials, and that has been hugely influential in terms of what we've been able to accomplish. Having the control on the management side, having access to all of the people, to the details, being able to watch everything closely. I'm in a very fortunate position where if there's something that's not working, I can tweak small pieces without just getting frustrated with a management company, switching a management company, having a couple months lost in transitioning across, different personnel and different software and those sorts of things, and kind of a new ramp up period. So it's been very helpful for me to have that level of access to the details and be able to make minor adjustments as necessary.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because you're really the tip of the spear. I mean, right now you're the boss. You're as high as they come. You're the kind of the sole operator, but with that sole operator, you have how many employees right now?
Oh, I have a fantastic team of just under 80 employees at the present time across construction materials and management. Our corporate staff has grown to 7 already, and we're looking to add a few more. And so that really, I've sort of replaced myself. So really now it's not just me anymore. We really have put together an outstanding team of people that are experts in their areas and do a fantastic job monitoring all the details. So it really has become a huge group effort, much more so than just a one-woman show. We never had third-party management. It wouldn't really make sense to dedicate the amount of time that we were spending up front, and couldn't really afford to do that without having that management fee, because I paid myself less than I pay my managers for several years getting all of this going and started. And even at that level in the early days, that was more or less bankrupting the management company. So those management fees were important just for survival, but then also just to really be hands-on, to know the business, to get to know the business, to build it the right way.
And then talk a little bit about the group that puts this whole thing together, that takes your vision, upgrades and updates all the stuff that's inside these apartment units, the backsplashes and the cabinets and the countertops and things like that. Did you have a background in doing all this work?
No particular background in all of the work, other than the fact that I'd done it all and managed all of the projects on the single family side. So that gave me a good foundation for managing both the laborers to do it and materials sourcing and that sort of thing. So we've built up a materials business that imports directly from China, and I am a minority owner in that. My partner, that's sort of his baby.
Where did you get that idea from? The materials business.
Well, I know Mike likes to take credit for the idea. So Mike at one point did say, I'm seeing some other guys that have loans out from me buy materials from China, and it seems like it's cheaper. You guys should look into that.
So they were supporting themselves, but you guys did a good job and took the time to go to China and develop a business, which is amazing.
Yeah, so that was really, really helpful. We had a partner in our second property that is actually a Chinese national, and her husband's American, so they live here, but she was very familiar with import and export and was very influential in helping us kind of get that rolling off the ground, and that's something that Will's really just taken and run with. There's a big cost savings.
Yeah.
There is definitely a big cost savings. I mean, we actually have a 10,000 square foot warehouse in Irving now, import numerous 40-foot containers every month, bring in 20-foot containers of vinyl plank flooring. So the biggest thing that really influenced us to get that started was when we bought the property Las Brisas that was 50% occupied, it needed 244,000 square feet of flooring. And we decided we were going to do all of that in vinyl plank because it just is much, much lower maintenance and looks really nice. Oftentimes you can get an upcharge for replacing the floor. You don't have to deal with the carpet issues and expense of cleaning it, replacing it. So that was probably the biggest motivating factor to get over there, because we were able to cut costs on our flooring by I would say, close to 60%
Wow.
from what most stuff was here.
So what I like about what Kim's business philosophy is in the materials business is that we're not going to give you a lot of choices, but the choices that we're going to give you are going to be high quality choices. And a lot of these properties, when you take them over, sometimes our patchwork quilts is that one maintenance person that comes on the property wants to have the property look at this way because of one ownership groups, or maybe they couldn't find the materials to replace it. So it kind of looks like a big patchwork quilt. And so door handles are different. Flooring is different. Cabinets are different. And so with Kim's philosophy, which I think is great, is that we're going to give you a small section sampling of things you can get. We'll give you at the greatest price, but that's all you're going to get. You're not going to get 15 different variations of it. And what that's good is that when the maintenance person comes to put stuff in, they don't have to guess what it's all about. It's this stuff. And the quality's there, and I thought you did a great job on that Las Brisas property.
The other thing is construction's been a huge piece of it. Initially, we had some third-party crews. We've tried various general contractors, and eventually, just due to the frustration of not having things delivered at the timeliness and quality that we wanted, we decided to build the crew in-house. So we now have 22 guys on our rehab crew, and they travel from site to site, and they handle all of the, initial round of interior renovations. So they replace all the light fixtures, add the glass tile backsplashes, retile the tub surrounds if it's necessary, add ceiling fans in bedrooms if there aren't any.
And how do you find these folks? Do you place ads in the paper? Is it friends and family that knows some of these workers?
It's mostly become friends and family. We advertise once in a while, but at this point, our RGC crew is really fantastic, and they've really become a family. And so a lot of the time we end up having somebody else's brother, his son, his nephew, and his cousin. That's been a really huge thing for us. We've tried to make it a great place to work. And so that's really helped. A lot of those guys have now worked for us for 3.5 years.
Wow. With consistent paychecks. That makes a huge...
And they're not on call. So They appreciate that as well, because a lot of them did have some experience in apartment maintenance.
Yeah.
But didn't want to deal with the on-call.
That's good. So maybe we talk a little bit about some of the other deals you've done. You've done 3 or 4 other properties after Las Brisas, is that right? So maybe kind of talk through some of those. What was the next one you did? You did a big deal called Sierra Park over in Northeast Dallas, is that right?
We did do Sierra Park. We did Water Ridge in between there, and then Sierra Park was a really cool deal over in Northeast Dallas. That one was pretty unique. It was not a widely marketed, just sort of a pocket listing type deal. It did get competitive, but we were able to get it at a price that we were very happy with. Over the course of that deal, we spent about $2.6 million, which is about $4,000 a door. That upgraded to our full upgrade package about 65% of the units. And on that one, we were able to save some of the rehab budget because a lot of the exterior work had been done pretty well and kept up pretty nicely by the prior management company. But the interiors really hadn't been touched much at all, and the rents were far below market. So we were able to make a big impact there.
What's a full rehab? What does that mean to you?
For us, that's all new vinyl plank throughout, 2-tone paint, refinish the cabinets, stainless steel appliances, glass tile backsplash, new faucets, light fixtures, ceiling fans, doorknobs, bath hardware.
Where do you store all this stuff before it gets placed into the building? Because when you're buying lots of this stuff, it's got to go someplace.
Well, Will's been great to provide good logistics on all of that. So that warehouse in Irving basically supplies us. So we put orders in usually weekly for kits for each of our units that we're going to renovate, and order obviously by the pallet for the flooring and that sort of thing.
And what does kit mean? I don't know what that means.
They actually put everything together in a single box. So the vanity lights, the doorknobs, the switch plate covers, everything that you need for that unit is in that one box, aside from the flooring and tile, which are just too heavy to lift that way. So that's been a great way to keep track of inventory better, keep control of what we're ordering and what we need.
And the property before this property, at the Sierra Park deal, it was called Water Ridge.
It was Water Ridge.
And how many units was that one?
That one was 476 units.
And Sierra Park was how much?
656.
So,
and then I guess there was Regal Commons in there, 444.
So those were all big properties. So Kim, like in Texas, likes everything big, even though she's not a Texan.
I'm a Texan now. I've been here 15 years.
You've been here long.
I claim Texas now.
Now you're a long-term Texan. So how do you find your equity partners?
I belong to a real estate mentoring group, and so I made a lot of connections and really kind of built my list through there initially. And then now that I've moved on from that, lots of friends and family referrals. A lot of people are now referring their parents and their kids and things like that have been successful investors.
Success breeds success.
Success breeds success. So each of the investors, I'll get some people that they work with or somebody they're related to. And
yeah, you're going to buy 4,200 apartment units. You need kind of specific education in real estate. I mean, was there anything that you took at the University of Iowa that I missed that I should have studied that you took, or where did you get all the smarts besides just being a smart woman?
Well, I didn't take any specific real estate classes, but the finance and accounting and economics, that financial background has been very, very important in doing all of this, because if you know the numbers and you follow the numbers, you can avoid a whole lot of trouble. But I did join a mentoring group, Lifestyles Unlimited. I was a member there for a long time. It gave me a really good starting place and foundation, and great group of people. Learned a lot just from other people that were also lead investors, other investors that actually own properties. Was probably the biggest education, was getting access to those people. And I've continued to remain close to a lot of those people.
So, having an education mentoring group is good, but also having access to capital, and that group has access to capital within their members.
Mm-hmm, that's true.
So that definitely gave you the push, the gas in the engine to keep investing money into these deals. So your thumbs up on getting specific education?
I think getting specific education is a great thing to do. I think it's important to know what you're doing, especially when you're investing on behalf of a lot of people. You're making decisions for a lot of other people, and so you need to really know what you're working on. So
you're in your 7th year now doing multifamily. So what's kind of changed? What's a little different today in today's environment than obviously 2011? Any challenges or headwinds you see today that you didn't have then, or what's easier?
Well, the prices are a lot higher.
Sure.
Fortunately, I think that Dallas just has the really strong economic fundamentals that make sense. So where some people have been more concerned with the price appreciation, I think there's still a lot of value to be had, but you have to really dig for it much more so. The properties that we purchased in 2017 were off-market properties, and it was a challenge. There were a lot of places where we had to really play ball strong in order to get those properties and get those deals done and beat out the competition, even on an off-market property.
Such as, to give an example, what are some of the differentiators and terms that got you the deal over some of the next buyer?
Well, let's see. They wanted to negotiate an LOI before I could see the financials.
Okay.
We got a small early access period, but $500,000 in hard earnest money was not only deposited but passed through on the date of contract execution.
Pretty strong.
So you had to play strong in order to get that one done. And the contract took a while. We spent 2 weeks on the very last indemnification provision, but it got done. It was a really, really cool, unique opportunity. I think probably actually taking on the 2-property portfolio is a huge part of what was able to get us that transaction. So that is one of the smaller properties that we own. We bought from the same seller, both the large property that was our initial target and then one of their other smaller properties that they were also interested in getting rid of. That one made sense also. But I think kind of pooling those together definitely helped us to win that transaction.
That's good. So what else is different in the marketplace? I mean, obviously pricing terms are a lot more aggressive to win these deals. But, rents are up, occupancy's up. So a lot of ways attracting capital is probably materially easier than the first couple times you did it, I would imagine.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, it's been very easy to attract capital. One of the nice things about the fact that we've been buying and selling so much is that we've generated a lot of our own capital. Mm-hmm. If you double up the money, then people give it back to you. Lots a little bit of money held back for taxes. And so we've been able to grow somewhat just by the profits that we've made for people, as well as attracting friends and family and really growing the investment pool that way.
That's good.
I got a nice Christmas card from Terry and Tim this year.
Did you?
I did.
That's good.
So they were part of your original investors, I remember.
Well, they were actually on Las Brisas. We needed a second signer, and Paul said, I've got just the people that you should meet. And so, yeah, Terry actually works for me now. She
is that right?
handles all of our payroll and a lot of the internal billing processes. So they've been instrumental. We've got a great group of KPs that have been working with us.
So have you really modified your investment strategy materially from the Spanish Chase deal to your last one? Or is everything pretty much aligned with obviously prices being a little bit higher?
It's definitely been extraordinarily fine-tuned in terms of the models that we're using and what things we're paying attention to and the variables we're tracking. But the general strategy has remained principally the same. We are starting to pay a little more attention to stuff that we're acquiring now and whether those are some assets are things that we want to do the same, fix it up and sell it. But then there are others that we are much more interested in looking at some sort of a refinance or recapitalization opportunity and starting to grow the portfolio somewhat by holding things a little bit longer.
Let's talk a little bit about financing. And from every time being a newbie to being a senior multifamily person like you are now, financing does change with more experience. And when you first got into multifamily, there really wasn't any non-recourse bridge lending at the time. And Mike, you did that transaction with Wells Fargo.
First two, right? We're both with me at Wells Fargo, and they're both require personal guarantees. And not only Kim and her partner, but I had to go bring some outside KPs that weren't the operating partners on the deal as well.
Is that typical for somebody that's fairly brand new to multifamily?
Yeah, especially considering it was a little tough sell that first deal because not only did they not have any previous multifamily ownership experience, the property was in pretty tough economic shape when they bought it, but then they wanted to self-manage it at the same time. So we had a triple whammy.
Strike one, strike two.
We still got it done, and I'm sure she still sends a Christmas card to Gary every year for stepping up and getting that deal done back in the day. But that's how you mitigate. A lot of it is just by having a strong balance sheet, sign the guarantees. Is certainly that'll solve a lot of sins. So cash on your balance sheet solves a lot of sins.
Yeah,
for sure.
If you don't have the experience, other people may have some liquidity, some good net worth, have them sign with you, and that certainly helps get the deal done. Let's move on over to Mr. Non-Recourse Bridge Lender, Jonathan Farrell. Tell us a little bit about, you've done a number of transactions for Kim. Tell us now that she checks the box for the experience, can she do a non-recourse loan, and what kind of parameters are you looking for in non-recourse bridge lending?
So I guess Kim and I met maybe 2.5 years ago when I actually financed the Sierra Park deal when I was one of the direct lenders. That was one where, again, we were looking for that experience and that track record that she was able to build with Mike's recourse platform back at Wells Fargo. And so we get comfort and solace in the fact that, again, that experience level is there. So we're really banking on the sponsorship and their ability to perform and having done a rehab deal in the past. And so to really say, look, she took a 50% occupied property out of the dirt and turned it into profits and sold it. And it told that story not only once, but twice. That set the tone and the platform for us to be able to go, okay, we're not putting anybody in business here. And the track record's there. And so, again, it is non-recourse. And so we're not having her sign her balance sheet. And so we're particularly in tune to what is the cash flow day one. We're not just looking for what the stabilized cash flow is going to be, although that's very important, but we want to know where our baseline is. And so if there's a shortfall in the payments, we don't get to go knocking on Kim's door for that shortfall legally, at least from the form of a guarantee. And so just being able to kind of start our baseline and then show what's the progress over the next one or 2 years. Now that you've done this a couple of times, you have a good understanding of not only how much money you need to spend, but when you need to spend it. What's most important to spend in the first few months versus the second year? Because, again, it's all a function of performance and understanding where the baseline is when we start from a coverage standpoint on the loan versus what your income is. we want to see that increasing. If it starts going backwards the other way, then obviously we're spending money and not getting the result of increased NOI, and that's problematic. And so the whole idea here is to increase income through renovations of these properties. And so Kim's done a great track record of doing that. We ended up financing
four more properties
size, and Sierra Park went full cycle. You sold that a few months ago. What did your investors make on that?
That one, I just did the final residual checks in December. So including cash flows, the total gross return was 151% in 2 years and 7 days of ownership.
I would say past performance is no indication of future returns.
Yes, please put that note in there. but it did turn out really well.
Yeah, that was a good one for her investors. Jonathan, going back to this non-recourse piece, if Kim had not had the experience being a borrower of Mike's for a number of years and getting the experience, could she have come off the street with no experience in trying to do a non-recourse bridge loan?
It would have been extremely tough. Never say never. I think there's ultimately a line in the sand of which leverage, if it's low enough, you start to not really care. From a lender standpoint, your basis is so low. So, could have gotten done probably, but not at max leverage, 75%. It probably would have been closer to 60, maybe even 50%. Again, speaking non-recourse.
Yeah. So then after Sierra Park, you guys had done the Walnut portfolio. Is that right, John?
Yeah, we did the Walnut portfolio, which was a 2-property portfolio in a similar submarket as Sierra Park, a little further up the street.
How many units was that? Do you remember?
568 across 2 properties.
560. I mean, these numbers are huge.
So it's 260 and 308 right next door to one another.
Wow. And then how much rehab per door on those?
Those were a little bit higher. The one property was in trouble with the city a little bit for the prior management and ownership's lack of repairs on some things.
Yep.
That actually turned out to our huge benefit because we had budgeted about $8,000 a door to renovate that one. And based on not meeting some city timelines, there was something that wasn't going to be done prior to closing that they thought was going to be done prior to closing. So we got an extra credit from the seller towards that work, but we had already budgeted for a lot of that work. So we were able to actually replace all of the siding on the property with hardy plank, which was really cool.
Mike, why do you like hardy plank?
It doesn't wear out like wood. It holds paint for 10 years instead of 3.
That's great.
Fantastic stuff. So that really changed the look of the property and updated everything. So that was an extra nice bonus to have on that one.
Jonathan, something like that, what was the leverage piece on that?
We got 75%.
We were at 75%.
Is that typical? Can you go up to 80 or 90 or 100% financing?
So, again, bank platform, 75% is going to be pretty much max, especially on a non-recourse basis. The platform I was on was somewhat atypical when it comes to bank platforms and what they can or can't do, especially the non-recourse function.
Mike, is that atypical?
Yeah, I would think so for a bank platform. There's some non-bank lenders will go to 80, 85, but you're talking materially higher rates and points in, points out, things like that.
Yeah. So 75% leverage on that deal?
On total cost, so total acquisition cost plus whatever the rehab cost is.
Yeah. That comes with a debt yield. Explain to me what a debt yield means.
So debt yield is basically the property's NOI divided by the outstanding loan balance. Another way to think about that is that's the lender's return on the performance of the property. So if they were to take it back, that would be their cash on cash in the property. So it's been around a while. It came out of more a CMBS platform years ago, but I think you'd find a lot of lenders starting to incorporate that into their underwriting in addition to debt service coverage ratio.
So you guys held money back on that transaction?
Yeah. So again, we do 100% holdback on the rehab. So all the borrower's cash goes in at closing. Their 25% goes in at the closing table, and then we fund out 100% of the rehab. So it starts off for the lender at a lower basis, loan to cost.
Yep.
And then we fund out or dilute that loan to cost up to 75% once the rehab is final and complete.
Okay.
One thing that I actually really liked about the bank loans, and this kind of varies from lender to lender, especially as you're looking at some of the other debt funds and things like that. There are some loans that are only charging you interest on the amount that you have drawn out. And there are others that are charging you interest on the full loan balance from day one. And that can make a pretty sizable difference. So that's something to watch for when you're choosing a lender.
Also, too, is that we had done a debt fund, bridge loan too, on a transaction. And you really didn't like one of the factors of the debt fund. And that's maybe something to bring up of what you thought somebody should actually know.
Well, I guess the thing to pay attention to on that particular one, we had a requirement to have all of the rents deposited into a lockbox account, which basically is just a specialized sweep account that the lender has access to. And so they would send out wires to our regular operating account the day afterwards, sweeping it down to $5,000. But that generated huge amounts of bank fees to where we actually had to have an entire extra unit rented for the month just to cover the bank fees. Sometimes that's something that can be negotiated, though, as well with various lenders. As long as you're hitting all the requirements, sometimes it's possible to remove that, but it varies from lender to lender.
Sounds good. Let's talk about the last transaction that, Jonathan, you did for Kim, and it's the one that I think was called Forest Cove.
Forest Cove, and then the other property is North Creek. I would call it more of a unicorn versus a challenge. It was one of those properties. I mean, it's in the heart of one of the hottest submarkets in Dallas and has been for a while now. But Kim, I'll let you tell the story. I mean,
it has 200 hard down units. One entire phase out of the 3 phases is completely down and has not been occupied for...
What is that hard down? What does that mean?
It is not be able to be occupied. It is not occupied and cannot be occupied.
And how many total units between the 2 properties?
That was 815.
So you're talking, a fourth of
a quarter of the portfolio.
Yeah.
So you bought 815 doors, and out of the 815, 200?
200, exactly.
Were not occupied.
Well, not only not occupied, but not occupiable at that point in time.
No.
Some of the wiring had been stolen. The boilers in that section of the property didn't work. They had started converting from a boiler chiller system to individual HVAC, but hadn't quite finished the work on that when it was foreclosed. And it was foreclosed on at least 13 years ago. And so we don't know how long it's been out of service prior to that. We've got a few guesses on it, but basically for at least 13 years, those 200 units have just been sitting vacant outside of perhaps some of the unauthorized occupants that may have been living in them from time to time.
So I called this a unicorn because obviously, that's a property that I think every value-added buyer in this market would jump on in a heartbeat. How in the world did you find that property, and how did you take that one down?
Like I said, that was just a tough transaction. It was sellers that really made me work for it. It was really strong terms. We had to come up on our price substantially. And while everybody wants that, I think if most people are honest, they don't really.
I don't want that.
Yeah.
That's too much work.
No, as a value add buyer, the idea of being able to capture the value of leasing up 200 units is an amazing, amazing thing. But I think also we were able to do it because we had built the network and the team and the in-house resources, and even on our contractors and our electrical contractors and plumbing vendors, to be able to put together a sizable budget. Just something of that scope when some units don't have wiring to them anymore and some units don't have plumbing to them anymore should scare a lot of people, whether it does or not. So, but yes, it's absolutely a unicorn. The idea of finding a property in a central area like that with that many down units is just completely and utterly unheard of. And it was basically just because the seller that we bought from had bought 2 phases from the prior owner and then the 1 phase from the bank that had foreclosed on the prior owner. And they had bought it for cash. And so there was no lender. So outside of the city nagging on them periodically, which they were mostly able to accommodate, I think, just by keeping the exterior of the building in good condition, there wasn't anybody to make them do it. So they got bids every year, as my plumbing vendor told me, and he almost didn't want to even come look at it anymore, but never actually pulled the trigger and did the work, probably because it is a daunting task. It's been a pretty major undertaking, but we are really, really excited about what we've been able to do on this.
How far are you into it?
We We'll be done with the first building shortly. It's taken a little while to get things up and going, dealing with the city issues, getting them to drop electrical meters and how we were going to work on that because there was missing wiring and various things. But they're starting to roll really quickly. We've got like the demo done on virtually all of them, but then are working through on the plumbing and electrical, filling in those gaps, setting tubs. Will was able to find us a great cabinet vendor and a granite source. So we are able to do some really, really cool finish out things at very reasonable prices on these. And
so how many units on the first phase?
The first building?
First building.
The first building is 24 units.
24. So you're just going to do building by building by building?
We're pretty much doing building by building.
Okay. So how long do you think it'll take you to get all 200 units online?
I think once we get through this initial stage, it's going to start rolling pretty fast. Now that they're really going, I mean, it took a couple months to get the first 2 units sort of sorted out. And then now I think it's going to start rolling pretty quickly. So I would guess at least by midsummer, I would think all of them would probably be online.
And the dumb question is how come the previous seller never did this?
Because they were in California and they had too much money to care and no lender to make them do it, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean,
was it tough for Jonathan for you to get it done?
Not really. You would think it would be. And again, when you looked at the debt yield, it was low. It was lower than what the lender would like to see going in on these transactions. But the story is what really backed this one up. It's an easier story to sell when you can say the way that they ultimately looked at it was, okay, we lease out these 200 units and we get the property up to market occupancy. All we have to do is just get market rents. What are the current rents that property is currently getting? Not what it's going to be after it's rehabbed and all that, but what is it currently getting? Lease that up to current market occupancy, and does that work? And it does, and it did, and that's what ultimately got them comfortable with. Like, how do you? I mean, again, Kim's great at what she does, but they kind of looked at how does anybody mess this up? It's just a matter of, especially with her background of being able to get in and do the rehab, but we don't have to worry about rent appreciation and getting upgraded market rents. What's the market getting today? And that worked.
And success breeds more investors that want to be part of your deal, but also success breeds more banks, some more lenders that want to be part of somebody that has a successful track record. What are some challenges right now that you're seeing in the market? Is there any headwinds out there? Just because, is it tough to get inventory?
I think a lot of it's just competition. There's actually been quite a bit trading hands, but I think years ago, Dallas was not on everyone's radar. And I think it's safe to say that DFW is on everyone's radar now. Mm-hmm. And so there's been a lot more groups that were previously playing in other markets that have started to really take an interest in Dallas and show up on the field that are serious players. There's just a lot of capital out there. I think some areas of the country have a few more economic concerns potentially going forward than Dallas does. So that's gotten not only investors from those other areas, but also investors that typically went for more commercial things are getting into multifamily as a little more safe haven. People need to live somewhere, even if the store next door closes.
How about for someone that's interested, not in Dallas, but is looking to do maybe their first deal in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or in Knoxville, Tennessee, or someplace that's a little smaller? What's your advice? Is it still a good time to get into multifamily?
I certainly can't speak as the expert in other submarkets outside of DFW. Mm-hmm. I think that those are places that you just need to look at closely. Not that a smaller market is really any different than a larger market. You just need to still look at the economics of that market. Who are your employers? Is the employment base growing? If the employment base is growing, then you're going to be fine. If it's shrinking, if everything relies on one single employer and their balance sheet's looking a little shaky, then I would be hesitant to go into those areas.
Mike, anything more to add to that?
No, I think she's right. I mean, I think some of the challenges with the smaller markets that I'm don't operate there, but from what I understand from my friends that I've owned in smaller markets, is labor pools also a challenge as well. So especially if you're doing a large scale renovation and you're a couple, 3 hours away from a major metropolitan area, just getting the the plumbers and electricians and flooring vendors and paint vendors just to come out and be reliable and show up. You just don't have the large pool of labor to pull from like you do in a major metropolitan area like Dallas or Chicago or wherever else. So I think that's also additional headwind. And then I think some of the other challenges I've heard, especially if you try to take on a large renovation like the one Kim typically does, is in these smaller markets, these properties have like a perception in the marketplace. And it's just not quite as fluid of a tenant base in a small market as it is in a major metropolitan area. So like in Dallas, she's able to change it. I'm sure it's not Forest Cove anymore. It's whatever.
No, it's still Forest
Cove. Okay, so you change the name, you put siding and paint and interiors, and people forgive you and they believe that it's a new property. In these smaller markets, they tend to think that it's still the old apartment complex from 5 years ago, and they have this stigma to it. So it's a little bit harder kind of moving the reputation of a property in a smaller market. I think those are some of the additional observations I kind of have between smaller and major markets.
I think that's definitely true. But I guess I will say redoing the reputation is sort of possible. While it's right here in DFW, I have a property in Duncanville that we're actually in the process of selling, but we bought it 2.5 years ago. And for whatever reason, in Duncanville, it acts like its own little small town. The people that are in that submarket are going to stay in that submarket until they die. So that's been one of the biggest shocks to me, is that there's been times when we've been able to push rents higher there than in North Dallas properties. Sometimes even by a significant amount, sometimes higher than our Irving property, which was a higher class of clientele and right near DFW. But eventually, over time, and we changed the name on that one, and for a very, very long time, everybody was just like, oh, it's just the Wimberleys, it's just the Wimberleys, it's just the Wimberleys. Now it's 800 Lincoln. It's finally established its own reputation. It did take the whole 2 years.
Well, that is a little bit on the outer edges of the metropolitan area, and there's a lot less supply in that market than some other submarkets as well. So that's probably leading to the fact that they don't have that many options to go, and you now have one of the nicer properties in the entire submarket, I'd imagine.
Right. But so I mean, it took a lot of time, but I think it is possible to change the reputation, even in an area. When we first had our signage and wanted to change the name, the city was, we're a small town here, we don't do that and whatever. And eventually we got them on board and they're like, okay, yeah, you're right, it looks nice. And the whole submarket's improved from what's happened there.
You're a little bit of an anomaly. And as you know, we've pounded the table more of trying to get women into multifamily. You told me an interesting fact that you've seen women from last year to, I guess, this year actually double in multifamily. Tell us a little bit about that statistic and how small of a sampling that is.
It's a pretty small sampling, but we were actually at the NMHC conference, which is National Multi-Housing Council, which is a group basically for the owners of multifamily, whereas NAA is much more focused on the property management companies. So this is much more owner, broker, lender focused conference. And so the first year I went was in 2016, and I took my director of operations, Natasha, with me. And I would say, I mean, I did not count every person there, but it had to be that there were no more than 1% women. And last year, I'm pretty sure it about doubled based on a general, overview of the room. So we were up to about 2%. So the conference is again here in a couple of weeks. And so we'll see if 2018 continues our exponential growth trend.
Yeah. So not only is Old Capital a big believer in trying to get more women into the multifamily ownership, but you're a big believer in it too, because your administrative staff, the people that really support you and make you successful, I mean, they're very talented people, and the whole inner circle is pretty much all women.
Not all, but there's a high percentage.
High percentage.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so you're a big believer in it too. So, this is not something, whether you're a man listening to this, get your wife or your spouse into this business. If you're a woman, step it up to the next level. Kim is a role model of a success story. We're a big supporter of Kim and all the work that she has done with her group. Now, if somebody wanted to know a little bit more about your company, what's the best person on your group to talk with?
You can certainly look at our website, which is exponentialpropertygroup.com, or exppg.com will also get you there. And Amanda is our investor relations manager, and she is probably the best person to talk to. And so if you email Amanda at exppg.com, she can get you more information, answer any questions, and get you set up if you're interested in that in the future.
That's great. Jonathan, any other additional questions for Kim at all?
No, I'm good.
No, it's been a good to observe from afar Kim's success over the last 70 years now, I guess, almost, and being a very small part of that makes me proud. So really, congratulations for all the success, and I'm sure you'll do well in the future years as well.
Well, thank you so much, and thanks to all three of you for the piece that you played in it. It's been a fantastic ride, and happy to have you along on the journey.
So what's going on in the capital world, Michael?
Well, eventually, you're going to book the speaker series in February, which is coming up.
We will.
So stay tuned. We'll have that. But we'll have one in February and probably another one, Dr. Dotsauer, in April.
Yeah, March.
And then we're looking forward to booking probably in October the second annual Old Capital Speaker Conference. So we're looking forward to hopefully have a larger group than this last year. We had 450 people, something like that. So hopefully we'll be, closer to 700, and hopefully have a few big name speakers there as well, on top of, some pit brokers and management companies, et cetera.
And then also, too, if you do think that we provide any type of value in the multifamily space, make sure you go on to iTunes or Stitcher. Give us a 5-star rating and give us a little briefing why you liked our podcast, or if any helps or hints, let us know. We appreciate that. And then don't forget, we're updating our new 2018 15-page white paper report on multifamily. Look for that towards the second week of January, going into the third week of January. That's going to be updated. There's a couple things that have changed, Michael, so we're going to get that updated so everybody can read that. So I think that's pretty much it. Anything else, Michael?
That's it. Yeah, definitely appreciate everyone listening. Refer a friend. If you like it, send it to one of your friends, and certainly you can find the white paper and the sample due diligence checklist at our website, which is www.oldcapitalpodcast.com. And there's also a contact us form there as well if you have any questions for the Ask Mike Mondays.
That's great information. Thanks, Michael Becker, Jonathan Farrell, and Kim Radaker. Always a pleasure. Thanks for hanging out with us. We appreciate that. I'm Paul Peebles. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.